The most radical act available to you right now is to finish something. Not start it. You're excellent at starting. Not plan it. Your notes app is a graveyard of intentions. Finish it. Complete it. Watch it exist in the world as a closed loop that no longer needs you. And I don't mean finish as in perfect. I mean finish as in done, released, moved past, no longer consuming your background processing power. Because here's what nobody's mapping: the incompletion tax you're paying every single day. They cannot extract value from someone who completes their work. They cannot monetize someone who closes loops. They cannot farm engagement from someone whose attention isn't fragmented across 17 unfinished projects. This is what Ernest Hemingway understood in 1921 when his wife lost a suitcase containing nearly all his unpublished manuscripts. Years of work gone. His response? He didn't spiral. He didn't sue. He didn't spend decades trying to reconstruct what was lost. He wrote better work, because the incompletion was gone. The ghost manuscript stopped haunting him. They called it tragedy. He called it liberation. And by the end of this, you'll understand why finishing might be the only form of freedom left. But first, we need to examine something you've been avoiding. Why can't you finish? Not won't. Can't. Why does every project you start with fire end up cooling in a folder you haven't opened in months? You've blamed yourself. Lack of focus. Weak discipline. Shiny object syndrome. But what if the inability to finish isn't a character flaw? What if it's the intended outcome? The economic model of the modern internet doesn't want you to finish anything. It wants you perpetually in the middle, perpetually planning, perpetually optimizing, perpetually consuming the next framework, the next course, the next productivity system that promises to be the one that finally works. You're not using these tools. You're being kept in motion by them. And here's what makes this particularly devastating. They've convinced you that starting equals doing, that having ideas equals creating value, that a Notion workspace full of templates equals progress. So you collect and collect and collect, and you call it preparation. Meanwhile, the people who actually shape your field, what are they doing? They're shipping. They're releasing imperfect work. They're finishing things on Tuesday and starting new things on Wednesday. They're building in public while you're optimizing in private. They sell you preparation and buy themselves momentum. This is not theory. This is pattern. The productivity industrial complex needs you stuck in the planning phase, because that's where the money is. Courses on productivity. Apps for organization. Coaches for accountability. An entire economy built on people who are always about to start. In 1912, a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor published The Principles of Scientific Management. He was obsessed with efficiency, with breaking tasks into their smallest components, with measuring everything. He studied factory workers with a stopwatch, timing how long it took to shovel coal, to move pig iron, to turn a screw. His goal was to eliminate waste, to optimize every motion. He succeeded. Factories became more efficient, production increased, costs decreased. But something else happened, something Taylor didn't anticipate. Workers became interchangeable. The knowledge of craft, the wisdom of experience, the pride of completion, all of it became irrelevant. What mattered was the system, the process, the repeatable steps. We're living in the Taylor system now, but for knowledge work. Every productivity method is Taylorism for your mind. Break it into tasks, track your time, optimize your workflow, measure your output. And just like in the factory, you've become interchangeable with your process. The system matters more than the outcome. But here's what Taylor missed, what the entire efficiency movement has always missed. Completion isn't efficient. The last 10% of any project is wasteful, messy, inefficient. It's where you fix the things that don't scale, where you handle the edge cases, where you make it actually work in the real world instead of just in your system. That's why you never finish. Because your productivity system is optimized for the wrong thing. It's optimized for process, for movement, for the feeling of being productive, not for the terrifying, inefficient, necessary work of making something done. Let's talk about what happens in your brain when you don't finish. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik Effect. Incomplete tasks create intrusive thoughts. Your brain keeps background processes running for every unfinished project, every abandoned idea, every half-written draft. It's not just metaphorical. This is measurable cognitive load. You know that feeling when you can't quite relax, when even your rest feels agitated. That's not anxiety. That's 43 open loops running in the background, each one draining just a little bit of your mental RAM, each one creating just a little bit of friction, each one making the next task just a little bit harder to start. Productivity culture tells you to manage this with better systems, smarter tags, more granular task breakdowns, weekly reviews. The solution is always more process, but that's like treating a leak by building a more elaborate bucket. The water's still spilling out, you're just making the container more complex. The actual solution is simpler and much harder. Close the loops, finish the thing, ship it, delete it, archive it, but actually decide. Make it stop existing in your present tense. Because here's what nobody tells you about creative work. Every unfinished project is a ghost that haunts your future work. You think you're keeping your options open. You're actually building a prison where every new idea has to compete with the accumulated weight of every idea you didn't execute. By the time you've collected enough half-started projects, there's no space left for anything to actually grow. Here's a historical parallel that might reshape how you see this. In medieval Europe, there was a practice among stonemasons called banker marks. When a mason finished a stone, they'd carve a small symbol into it. Their signature, not for ego, for accountability. At the end of the day, they were paid based on how many stones they'd completed. Not started, not planned, completed. The mark meant, this stone is done. It's no longer my problem. It's part of the cathedral now. Move to the next stone. And cathedrals got built. Projects that would take multiple lifetimes got completed because each person focused on finishing their stones, not on designing the entire building. We've lost this. In knowledge work, there are no banker marks. Everything stays in draft. Everything's always one more revision away from being ready. You're working on a cathedral, but you haven't finished a single stone. And here's what makes this particularly insidious. The people who benefit from your incompletion have convinced you that this is what professionalism looks like. That real quality means endless revision. That shipping before it's perfect is amateur, so you polish and refine and optimize, and the work never leaves your hard drive. But perfect is a moving target. The moment you solve one problem, you notice another. The moment you clarify one section, you see how another section could be better. Perfectionism isn't high standards. It's a mechanism that prevents completion, and it's not coming from inside you. It's an infection from a culture that profits from your perpetual inadequacy. Here's a concept you need to understand: the completion threshold. For every type of work, there's a point where additional effort produces diminishing returns. The last 5% of quality takes 50% of the time, and that ratio gets worse as you approach perfection. 99% quality might take twice as long as 95%. 99.9% might take 10 times as long. This is mathematically inevitable. It's called the Pareto principle in efficiency contexts, but I want you to see it differently. That last 5% isn't just time-intensive. It's soul-destroying. It's where good projects go to die. It's where your enthusiasm turns to resentment, where your clarity turns to confusion, where the thing you loved becomes the thing you avoid. Professional creators understand this instinctively. They ship at 95%. They let the real world teach them the last 5%. They finish Project A at 95% and start Project B, rather than spending 6 months trying to perfect something that's already good enough to be useful. But you've been trained to see this as laziness, as cutting corners, as not caring enough. So you chase that last 5%, and while you're chasing it, someone else ships 3 projects at 95%, gets feedback, improves, ships 3 more. They're not more talented than you. They're not more disciplined. They've just accepted something you haven't. Done is better than perfect because done exists and perfect doesn't. Now here's where this gets psychological. There's a reason you can't finish, and it's not what you think. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. You're afraid. Afraid of what happens after completion. Because as long as the project is unfinished, it's still perfect in potential. It could still be everything you hoped, but the moment you finish it, the moment you release it, it becomes actual, real, judgeable, and almost certainly less than you imagined. The unfinished project protects your ego. It's a shield against failure disguised as a commitment to quality. You're not failing if you haven't tried yet. You're not rejected if you haven't submitted yet. You're not mediocre if you haven't shipped yet. The work stays in the realm of possibility, where it can still be brilliant. This is what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance in the war of art. But I think he was too kind. It's not just resistance. It's a trap you're building for yourself. Every day you don't finish, you prove to yourself that you're the kind of person who doesn't finish. Every project you abandon reinforces the identity of someone who starts but doesn't complete. You're not waiting for the right time. You're practicing incompletion. And your brain learns what you practice. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. You've done the reps on starting and abandoning. You're a black belt in almost finishing. You've mastered the art of perpetual revision. These are skills now. Skills you didn't mean to develop, but skills nonetheless. So what's the alternative? Here's where most advice fails you. They'll tell you to just ship it, to embrace imperfection, to let go of perfectionism, as if the problem is motivational, as if you just need the right slogan on the right poster to break through. But you don't need motivation. You need a different relationship with completion. You need to see finishing not as a one-time event, but as a practice, a skill you can build, a muscle you can strengthen. And like any muscle, you don't start with the heaviest weight. You start with something you can actually lift. There's a writer named Anthony Trollope who understood this in the 1800s. He wrote 47 novels, not by inspiration, by system. He wrote for exactly 3 hours every morning before going to his day job. He wrote 250 words per 15-minute interval, tracked with a watch. When he finished a novel mid-session, he'd immediately start the next one in the same sitting. This sounds insane, mechanical, soulless. But here's what it actually was, a practice of completion. He finished books not because each one was perfect, but because the system was designed for throughput, not perfection. He optimized for done, not great. And in doing so, he became prolific. Which meant he got more at-bats, which meant he got better, which meant his later work was actually great. You're doing the opposite. You're optimizing for potential greatness on a single project. Which means you never get the reps, which means you never improve, which means you never build the confidence that comes from seeing something through. You're trying to skip the practicing phase and go straight to mastery, and it doesn't work that way. So here's what actually works. Completion sprints, not productivity sprints. Completion sprints. Pick the smallest unfinished thing you have. Not the most important, not the most promising. The smallest. The thing you could finish in a day if you just focused on closing the loop instead of making it better. Finish it. Not perfectly. Finish it adequately. Finish it to the point where it no longer requires your attention. Then move to the next smallest thing and finish that. Build the muscle of closure. Prove to yourself that you're capable of seeing things through. Not in theory, in practice. This is not about lowering your standards. This is about building a different skill. The skill of completion. And once you have that skill, once you've proven to yourself that you can finish things, then you can tackle the bigger projects. But not before. Because right now, your track record says you can't be trusted to finish. You need to change that data. There's a concept in software development called technical debt. Every shortcut you take, every hack you implement, every time you choose fast over right, you're borrowing from your future self. Eventually, the debt comes due. Eventually, the whole system becomes so tangled that you can't add new features without breaking old ones. But there's another kind of debt nobody talks about. Completion debt. Every project you start and don't finish is a liability on your cognitive balance sheet. Every half-formed idea, every abandoned draft, every I'll come back to this folder, these are debts. And unlike technical debt, they don't get fixed when you refactor. They just accumulate. They metastasize. They compound. And here's the cruel part. The interest rate is variable and always increasing. The longer a project sits unfinished, the harder it becomes to finish. You forget the context. You lose the momentum. You build new skills that make the old work look amateur. You develop new standards that make the old work look inadequate. So you either abandon it completely or start over. which just creates more incompletion. The only way to stop accumulating completion debt is to declare bankruptcy on some projects and finish the others. Not save them all. Not keep all your options open. Choose. Brutally. Some things die unfinished. Some things get completed to good enough. Neither feels good, but both are better than the slow suffocation of infinite incompletion. Here's what the most prolific creators understand that you don't. Completion is not the end of the process. It's the beginning of the feedback loop. An unfinished symphony exists in your head, where it's perfect. A finished symphony exists in the world, where actual humans can hear it, respond to it, critique it, be moved by it, remix it, build on it. The work doesn't become real until it's finished. Until then, it's just expensive daydreaming. And you might be fine with that. Many people are. They'd rather have the perfect idea than the imperfect reality. They'd rather keep the dream alive than test it against the world. But if you're still listening, I suspect you're not one of those people. I suspect some part of you is exhausted from carrying all these unfinished things. Some part of you wants to know what it feels like to actually complete something, to close the loop, to say it's done and mean it. That exhaustion is useful. That's your signal. That's your body telling you that the current strategy isn't working. That accumulation isn't the same as creation. That starting isn't the same as doing. That potential isn't the same as actual. So here's what I want you to consider, not as advice, as an experiment. What if you declared a completion year, 12 months, where you don't start anything new? You only finish things, or explicitly abandon them. You go through your projects folder, your drafts, your someday maybe lists, and you sort them into two categories, finish or delete. Not finish perfectly, finish adequately. Bring them to a point where they no longer consume your attention. Where you can look at them and say that's done without qualification. And everything that doesn't make the finish list? Delete it. Not archive it. Delete it. Remove it from your system. Let it stop existing. This sounds extreme. It is extreme. But your current situation is also extreme. You're carrying the psychological weight of dozens, maybe hundreds of unfinished intentions. That weight is real. That cost is real. And you're paying it every day in fragmented attention, in guilty avoidance, in the quiet knowledge that you're not who you claim to be. A completion year would change that. Not all at once, not dramatically. But one closed loop at a time, one finished project at a time, one less ghost haunting your creative process at a time. And at the end of that year, you'd have something you don't have now, a track record of finishing. Data that contradicts your current identity, proof that you're capable of completion. Here's a story that illustrates the stakes. In 1962, a composer named György Ligeti wrote a piece called Poème symphonique for 100 metronomes. The entire piece is exactly what it sounds like. 100 mechanical metronomes, all wound up, all set to different speeds, all started simultaneously. Then the performers leave the stage. The piece plays itself. At first, it's chaos, cacophony, randomness. But gradually the faster metronomes run out, the texture thins, patterns emerge, relationships between rhythms become audible, and at the very end, one single metronome is left ticking. Then silence. The piece is about entropy, about how systems naturally move toward disorder, about how completion is built into the mechanism. Each metronome has a finite amount of energy. When it's spent, the metronome stops. There's no choice. No endless continuation. Just completion. Your projects are not like this. They don't have built-in stopping points. They can continue indefinitely, consuming your energy, your attention, your belief in yourself. They're perpetual motion machines of incompletion. And the only way to stop them is to actively choose to finish them or to actively choose to kill them. But most people do neither. They just let projects slowly fade into the background noise of their lives. They become part of the ambient guilt. The constant awareness that you're not doing what you said you'd do, that you're not who you want to be, that the gap between your intentions and your actions keeps growing. This is not a small thing. This is your life. This is how you spend your one allocation of time and attention. And right now you're spending it maintaining a collection of unfinished work that serves no one, helps nothing, and prevents you from doing the work that actually matters. So where does this leave you? I'm not going to pretend there's a simple answer. The reason you can't finish is probably different from why the person next to you can't finish. Maybe it's fear of judgment. Maybe it's perfectionism. Maybe it's that you don't actually care about these projects anymore, but haven't admitted it. But whatever the reason, the solution is the same. Make a decision. Finish it or kill it. Stop letting it exist in limbo. Stop paying the completion tax. Stop accumulating debt. Start closing loops. And when you finish something, anything, notice how it feels. Not proud, not accomplished, just lighter, like you've put down a bag you didn't realize you were carrying. That's the feeling of completion. That's what you've been missing. That's what's waiting on the other side of this accumulation you call productivity. The work doesn't have to be great. It just has to be done. Because done exists. Done can be judged. Done can be improved. Done can be learned from. Done can lead to the next thing. But unfinished? Unfinished just sits there, taking up space, using energy, preventing growth. You already know this. Some part of you has always known this. That's why you're still here. That's why this resonates. Not because it's new information, but because it's confirmation of something you've been suspecting. That the way you're working isn't working. That accumulation isn't creation. That potential isn't enough. So finish something. Today. Not your magnum opus. Not your most ambitious project. Just something. Anything. One closed loop. One piece of completion debt paid off. One less ghost. And then tomorrow, finish something else. Not because you have a system, not because you're following a method, but because you're building a different identity. The identity of someone who finishes things. Someone who closes loops. Someone who completes. That person is not who you are right now. But that person is who you could become. One finished project at a time. One closed loop at a time. One less unfinished thing at a time. The question is whether you will. Whether you'll trade the comfortable fiction of infinite potential for the uncomfortable reality of finite completion. Whether you'll choose done over perfect. Whether you'll choose actual over possible. That choice is available right now. Not eventually. Not when you're ready. Right now. The only thing preventing it is the story you're telling yourself about why it has to be later. Why it has to be better. Why it can't be now. But that story is just another unfinished thing. Another loop you're keeping open. Another piece of completion debt. Close it. Finish something. Do it badly if you have to. Do it scared. Do it incomplete. Just do it done. Because on the other side of done is not perfection. It's capacity. The capacity to start something new without the weight of everything you didn't finish. The capacity to learn from actual feedback instead of imagined criticism. The capacity to become the person who finishes things. That person is waiting. But they can't emerge while you're still maintaining the museum of unfinished intentions. So finish something. Not tomorrow, now.